Hello and welcome back to Connect 2021. Next up, we have HAVi Technologies, specialists in providing solutions to help businesses improve hand health by minimizing the risks of exposure to vibration. The company's experience, smarter processes, and insight-led approach to managing HAVs has made it a preferred partner for leading businesses operating across industries, including manufacturing, rail, automotive, and construction. HAVi guides its clients to compliance and equips managers with actionable insights to protect their workforce, remain compliant, and improve hand health. They'll demonstrate just how easy it can be to manage HAVs with an integrated solution and how insights can be used to drive risk down as low as reasonably possible. Join us after the presentation with Technical Manager Joel Clark as he answers your questions and pop them in the Q&A tab on the top right-hand corner of your screen. We hope you enjoy and we'll see you soon.
So the first part of the two parts of our kit that we'll be showing you today, we've got the HAVi unit. Now we've got the HAVi unit in use since about 2008, so it's been in the industry for a long time. And all the HAVi unit basically is a trigger timer. So what we do is we take in the predetermined vibration magnitude, which we had from the manufacturers, an online database, or from the real timing tool use measurements that we can do. We program that into the HAVi unit, and then as soon as it detects a vibration, so as soon as I pull the trigger on a drill, for example, the HAVi starts counting. It'll count the trigger time. It'll calculate your HSE points for you and display them up on the screen. And initially, when the HAVi was first released in, again, 2008, it was to aid a paper-based system. So the operator would have a HAVi on his tool with a pen and a notepad. They would fill in the information onto the notepad and upload it via their supervisor onto their management system. With the introduction of the watch, what the watch does is the watch takes the information off the HAVi unit and puts it into more reliable paperless format. So it is then accessed via a cloud system, and all the data is recorded that way. So when you get to the HAVi screen, you get a little bit closer. As you see on the HAVi, we have three units that you can see there. We have the vibration magnitude in the top, the number of HSE points, and then importantly at the bottom we've got the trigger time. So what will happen if I did mimic a vibration, so I'm going to move the HAVi from side to side, you'll start to see, you'll see the time on the bottom starts ticking up the trigger time, so it's calculating accurate trigger time. Now without a device like the HAVi, you wouldn't be able to determine the actual trigger time. You would still be relying on some degree of guesswork. And then what the HAVi does is it calculates the magnitude with the trigger time and gives you your HSE points up on the screen there. So I've got the HAVi unit, that HAVi does all the work, but moving on to that, we've got the HAVi watch. Now the HAVi watch we developed in 2017, and basically the idea was that we could drag the hand-on vibration management into the 21st century. So beforehand, like I said before, we used to have an operator who would be given a HAVi either for himself or on each of their tools, and they'll be given a logbook and a pen, and they'll be able to do the process of filling in their points at the end of every shift or the end of every week, and you have more time with operators and supervisors chasing up bits of paper and filling in spreadsheets and filling up filing cabinets than you actually do getting any work done. So we introduced the HAVi watch. What the HAVi watch does is it takes that onus of paper and makes the system completely paperless. So the operator can wear the watch on their wrist, and connecting it with the HAVi unit, which is still doing all the work, so it's still measuring that vibration exposure on the tool, but it's taking the information off the HAVi unit, putting it onto a watch, and then it allows us to make it, like I say, completely paperless and into a cloud-based system. So the watch, how it basically works is the watch is given to an operator who will have their name on it and their own personal exposure limits on there. So by default, obviously it's the 100 and 400, and the operator can use the watch and the HAVi in conjunction with each other. And when the watch hits the alerts that the operator is set to, so when it hits the 100 points, the watch will alert them that they've hit their EAV, their action value. It'll also alert them at 200 and at 300 points, and then again finally at 400 points when they're due to stop for the day. So when they hit that 400 points, their watch has alerted them throughout the day, and it gives them that bit of onus on the operator that if they're up to up to a high exposure points of 200, 300 points, and it's still quite early on in their shift, they've got a lot of time left at work and not a lot of points left to play with, it means that they can start putting actions in place with their supervisors and their colleagues to try and bring their exposure down. So you can see now we've got the HAVi watch up a little bit closer. So you see plenty of screens that we can see and look at on the HAVi. So most importantly at the top there, we've got the time. So it is a watch, we can market it as a watch. So all the operators that are wearing HAVi watches will know the time. Underneath that we have the company name and then the operator name on there. So what the watch is doing is giving the operator their own personal exposure. So their operator at all times is going to know how many exposure points they've been exposed to. So if I flick through on the watch, it's going to take me to the number of points that I'm at for the day and also tell me if I'm paired up with the HAVi unit. And also by flicking the bottom button, I'll see what my own personal EAV in ELV is. So by default, it's 100 and 400, but if an operator was to be on reduced exposure, it would say there that they were on a reduced number of points. So now let's quickly show you how easy it is for the operators to use the kit. So with the watch, we have two buttons on the side of the watch, and all they have to do is they press and hold the top button down, and it brings up the HAVi symbol. So that watch now is looking for a HAVi unit. So if I take the HAVi unit and press the white button, what will happen is the watch will flash up as though it's paired. So those two now are talking to each other. So if I start to use the HAVi unit, so if I've got this strapped onto a drill, onto a mower, onto a breaker, as I start to use that tool, what you'll see is the points will start to tick up on the watch. So that is giving that operator their own exposure real time. Anytime they look at their wrist, they can see what their exposure is. And then all they do when they finish using the tool is they press that white button again. And what it does is it unpairs them. And that it kicks them away at using that tool. And it means that they're now no longer paired. So somebody else can pick up and use that tool, or they're now free to go and use another one of their tools. So one of the main benefits of the HAVi being a trigger timer and not a measuring device is the fact that purely because it's only a trigger timer, it can go anywhere on the tool. So rather than having to try and block off any handles, any triggers, any exhaust ports or any safety features on the tool, we can cable tie it or fabric tie it onto the body of the tool, and then when the tool starts to vibrate, the HAVi will detect that vibration wherever it is. The benefit of this, obviously on a big tool like this, is it's quite easy to find, but if you're looking at sort of smaller air-powered tools, the HAVi does then fit on the airline and in different areas and on different tools. So there's plenty of different places that we can get it on there, and if it's on there on the body of the tool, the operator can always see it and they can always pair up with it as and when they come to use the tool.
Welcome back, everybody. We hope you enjoyed that demonstration and are enjoying all of the talks this week. It's been a jam-packed, action-packed week full of loads of great content. Don't forget, everything is available on demand. If you've missed anything, make sure you get to the demand platform and you can watch all those. So if you've got any questions on this demo, you can post them in the tab on the right hand corner. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Joel. Joel, it's great to see you this morning. So is it necessary to monitor every individual and every tool permanently?
No, not necessarily, Joe. So the HSE basically said there's no need to do that constant monitoring. And quite often what happens is a company, if they're constantly monitoring, they fall into a trap of sort of recording and hoarding data without actually doing anything about it. So what we recommend, and sort of our primary example going forward, is what we call sample monitoring. So where we have a set of HAVis and watches that we assign to a team or an area, and we would monitor that area for a set purpose of time, so a week, a month, 6 months, and then we would move that kit from one area to the other. And from that, basically what we do is we get a good idea for the individual operators for the time that they're using it. So for that period, that month they were using the kit, we'll know exactly what their average day, average month, average week looks like. But then also as we move it across the company and across into different areas, we get a wider range. So it allows us to put actions and insights based on the information that's coming back, rather than just wasting everybody's time and monitoring all the time. And obviously that it sort of brings down that initial investment that's required as well. So rather than buying, say, a watch for every operator, which we can start to add up, we can sort of start small, find out what the risk areas are, the high risk areas, and if there is any high risk areas, then if there's a high risk operator or high risk area, we can sometimes monitor more consistently. And then if that constant monitoring is required, it's always an option that's there, but it's not a requirement. So we don't push anybody down to do it unless it's their choice.
Fantastic. So are there any measures in place if a user, say, ignores the warning?
It ignores the warnings on the watch. So the watch is obviously, they alert at the 100, the 200, the 300, and the 400 points, and that's just that's the way of to put an onus on the operator and themselves to, if they are over exceeding themselves on their exposures, that they know where the limits are, and they know they know how long they've got left. So say if they at 300 points and it's still quite early in the day, they've got quite a lot of time left of work and not a lot of points left to play with. So what we do put a lot of responsibility on operators to manage their own exposure real time, and obviously all the watch can do is it will alert the operators when they get into those limits, and when they hit that limit, they have to stop and down tools for the day if they hit that 400 points or their company's only LV. And then if that exposure is hit, then obviously it is on them to it's on the operator to stop and down tools. What the system will do is it'll alert all the supervisors and managers and HSE managers, however high up you want to send it. If there is an exposure that exceeds that 400 points, we can make everybody alert that there's been overexposure in place, and investigation needs to happen. Then that operator needs to be put in place so that doesn't happen again, basically.
Oh, fantastic. And I suppose you'll work with a company to be able to decide what's right for them, to be able to know the hierarchy of,
Exactly. Yeah, so it's all
escalation.
completely bespoke. So there's some companies where they'll want all the supervisors to know, whereas there's some companies where they want it going straight up to the top. So it can vary, and then we can be flexible with that.
Great stuff. Is there any danger from of the watch pairing with the wrong HAVi if another user is pairing at the same time?
No, so it can, the watch is obviously designed to pair up with a HAVi when it's in use, and to sort of combat that, what we've done is we've designed the HAVi to only have a sort of around a meter pairing radius. So if you were to be working with a tool, especially with COVID, you shouldn't be within 2 meters of anybody anyway. But if you were pairing up with a tool that you were using, that your watch will pair up with your tool, and whilst you're paired to it, nobody else can pick up and use it. When you unpair with it, obviously that tool then becomes available, and it's the possibility isn't there based on the distance.
Fantastic. Does it need to be calibrated?
No, so one of the sort of benefits with the HAVi, with the HAVi is only being a trigger timer. It's not actually measuring any vibration. What the HAVi does is it just detects trigger time. So when it's on the tool, it detects the trigger time, and because of that, we don't need to do any calibration. So there's no need to take the HAVis off and send it back to us or send it to somebody and pay a fee every year. Once it's strapped onto the tool, it's good to go for its life cycle.
Oh, fantastic. So what is the power source? And if batteries, how long do they last?
Yeah, so the power source in the HAVi is it's a lithium battery that's soldered into the unit, and that's obviously for protection of it when it's on building sites and the like. And the battery life on it, we say it gets around 1,000 trigger time hours, which we've sort of worked out of an average use of a day, probably lasts you around 2 or 3 years. But we guarantee at least a year on the battery life, so it's 2 or 3 years of usage of it, and then all the batteries just need changing, and then they're good to go again.
Oh, great. So yeah, good life cycle for it. Can you give an example of how you've worked with other organizations to change their process?
Yeah, so one of the sort of things that we sort of pride ourselves on at the minute is sort of insight-led data. So when that data comes in, so the information that comes off the HAVs and the watches is only really useful if we use it. If we sometimes, like I say, it's easy to fall into the trap of just having this data and just looking at it and sort of patting yourselves on the back that everything's fine. But what we did is we've dealt with a company that springs to mind, is they were grinding down metal on shipping containers, and we find that they were getting 48% of their overexposure for the whole site was happening on this one grinder. And because of the trigger time information we've got, we knew that was only actually used for 23% of the time. So that tool was only being used for a quarter of the time, but giving half of the exposure for all the operatives across the site. So what we did is we with that information that we got, without using the HAVis and the watches, we wouldn't have had that information. Is we looked at that risk and we thought, oh, what can we do to sort of bring this exposure down? And one of the things we trialed was with the use of a sandblaster. So rather than grinding the metal, we used a sandblaster in a booth. Obviously, it brings its own risks, but we trialed it and we looked at that exposure. We used it for a month, and that exposure just shot straight down. So they went from, they were breaching EAV pretty much every single day, and they had a couple of ELV breaches in there as well. And then when this sandblaster was trialed, the points dropped right below the 100, and then when it was implemented across the site, the exposure pretty much disappeared. And then what that company did is they implemented that, and are continuing to implement that across all their different sites, which means that exposure went low, and since then it stayed low. So that's one individual case that we're quite proud of, that we can sort of affect that hand health of those operators.
Yeah, fantastic. Gosh, you wouldn't know that data and be able to make that switch without using the HAVi.
Exactly, that information, it's so important. Like I said, the important thing is that we use it.
So this person represents an organisation working in potential explosive atmospheres.
Yeah.
Is your product safe to use in those kind of environments?
So one of the things we're sort of pleased and we've been working through for the last couple of years is getting an ATEX certified hand-on vibration management system. So we have a ATEX HAVi and a HATEX watch that are now available, and they've been certified to operate in explosive environments up to zone 0. So they're particularly suitable for the sort of offshore gas environments. So, and also the gas repair networks and that sort of thing. But obviously, if anybody wanted any more information on that, feel free to get in touch, and we can sort of go into the individual needs and requirements of that if you are sort of needing the ATEX side of things.
Yeah, 100%. So how do you store the data? Is it GDPR compliant?
Yeah, so obviously that with when the HAVi was introduced before GDPR was a thing, and since it's come, we've had to make a few changes, particularly with removing stuff that individuals about the operators. So now the information that we keep is purely relevant to hand-on vibration. That has no sensitive information there anymore. So we keep the operator's first name and surname, and then any employee numbers that are relevant to them, and then only their exposure. So if they, for example, if they had a diagnosis of hand-on vibration syndrome, we wouldn't need to know what their diagnosis is, what their symptoms are. We just need to know that they have a reduced exposure, and then it's not something we store. We don't store the information on their own sensitive information. It is just first name, surname, and how many points you've got. That's all the information we need, and that's all the information we store.
Yeah, and that gives people peace of mind. So what happens when an operative takes a lunch break, for instance? Does the HAVi automatically unpair?
Yeah, so what with obviously it's a question we get a lot. With the HAVis and the watches, we don't base it on distance. So if I was to say if I was using a strimmer, for example, and I was using a strimmer and I went over to get some more fuel or go to get a new wire, what we don't want is when the operator walks to his van and back, the watch and the HAVi to unpair, because that cause a hassle for the operators when everything we're trying to do is be hassle free.
Oh, it's so annoying, isn't it? When that happens.
Yeah, it'd be like if every time you got in your car you had to repair your phone with a Bluetooth, all that sort of stuff, it'd be a nightmare. So what we do is we based it on time instead. So when an operator puts down the tool and stops using the tool, what it does is it sets off a timer in the watch, and after 15 minutes the watch will alert the operator to say, are you still using this tool? And if the operator says yes, I'm still using the tool, they get another 15 minutes. So if the operator is still using the tool, then what it also saves, if the operator is sat in the canteen having a lunch and that alert comes up and say, oh no, I'm not using this tool, they can unpair, and that means when they come back, any points that someone else might have picked up, the watch won't try and collect those points for them.
Oh, good stuff. So what's the best position to place the HAVi on the tool?
Yeah, so obviously we get this question a lot, but the beauty with the HAVi, because it isn't monitoring vibration, it's not measuring vibration magnitudes, it is monitoring trigger time. The HAVi can go anywhere on the body of the tool. So as long as it's not blocking any safety vents, any ports, any triggers, anything that's going to affect either the usage or the safety of the tool, it can go anywhere. And the benefit with the HAVi, as you can see on here, is because of its grooves, it sits quite nicely on an airline as well. So if you have an air-powered tools, if you're using small air-powered tools, the HAVi can sit on the airline, and that will still detect the vibration. So when it detects a trigger, when it detects a vibration, it starts counting. It's not counting anything, so it doesn't need to be anywhere in particular.
So how important is it to ensure accredited vibration magnitude data is used as the basis?
Oh, see, that's so obviously a lot of things are all quite sort of open to interpretation, but that is really critical. So so any vibration magnitudes that are used in your risk assessment have to be collected in line with so there's British standard regulations. So BSEN 5349 and 8041. And so if you're having a consultant or someone like us come out and measure the tools, you need to make sure that the tools are being measured to those standards. Otherwise, the risk assessment could have holes in it. And we have dealt with customers before where they've had someone measure it and they've not quite measured to the right standard, and they've sort of been operating at the assumption that they were at this level when actually they were actually at this level. So that is really important.
Yeah, very important. So, what is the best position to play? Oh, sorry, already asked that. What does so many questions, which is great. Does the HAVi watch have to be worn on the wrist?
No, not necessarily. So the HAVi watch, because again, the HAVi is only taking information from that it's being given from the HAVi. The HAVi watch can be worn on either wrist. So it's because it's not measuring vibration. In theory, you can wear it on either wrist. But we have had companies in the past that the operators don't want to wear a wrist either for if they've got 2 or 3 layers on with PPE and the big gloves and all that sort of stuff. So we have a where the operators had it sort of attached to their person through the belt buckle in the top pocket. As long as the usage of the HAVi is actually being maintained and the operators are using the kit, it can be used it can be worn in any way. So that the fact that it's not measuring anything it works in our advantage in that regard. It means that operators are a bit more comfortable with using it. They're not having to strap it really tight to the wrist and have it on the hand all the time. They can wear it sort of freely as they will.
I think that's really helpful actually, because some people don't enjoy wearing jewelry on their body, and
Yeah,
I
and
suppose
well, especially if you're working in a foundry and it's hot, you've already got having to wear a long sleeve high vis. You're not going to want to have to wear a watch as well. So it's good that the operators have that option, and we're
yeah.
not forcing them to wear something they don't want to wear.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the benefits of the integrated solution versus like a paper-based solution?
So obviously the paper-based solution was sort of originally how it was all managed, and before we sort of tried to sort of drag it into the 21st century, we sort of helped the paper-based system. HAVi was originally designed to help that paper system. But I think the sort of benefits, anyone who's used a paper-based system, any operators, they will tell you the weakness of it themselves. You're filling in bits of paper every day. Then you've got supervisors chasing those bits of paper, and then you've got a company, you've got someone uploading that into a database or onto a spreadsheet, or it's put it in a filing cabinet, and there's all these bits of paper, and these different cogs that can be, if someone's off sick, all of a sudden you're missing a week of exposure. And it's also, if someone on Monday morning, for example, gets an overexposure, by Friday afternoon when that data is uploaded, that's already happened. We've missed that exposure. 2 or 3 days down the line, they could have exposed themselves every single day since then. Whereas with the watch system, the operator was first off alerted real time, so they're aware when they're overexposed, and then also when that data is downloaded at the end of the shift, the supervisors are then instantly made aware, and the health and safety managers and the team leaders, and it goes up the chain. So anything sort of real time is caught, and obviously just purely saving on someone data entering or writing down bits of paper. If it can avoid me writing things down, I know I'm all up for it. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's a win-win. So is the system waterproof and dustproof?
yeah, so the HAVis are the waterproof and dustproof to the IP65. So they can be fully submerged. They can in any sort of environment. They can survive in those environments, and they can take full water on. They won't fill up with dust either.
Oh, great. And so this person says, I really want this system. I really want this system.
We like the enthusiasm.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think it sounds great. How much is it and where can I buy it?
So in terms of how much of it costs, the system, what we've sort of designed is, with every other area of health and safety, whether it be gloves, whether it be hard hats, boots, and that sort of stuff, it's all relatively low cost, and we see no reason why that HAVs shouldn't be the same. About the same. So what we basically managed to make the system cost less than the price of a cup of coffee for the operator per day. So if you're spending £5 a week on gloves for the operator, £30 a couple of months on boots for it, we sort of want to sort of slip it into that catalog. We don't want it to be this big massive sum that people have to go and fork out. We can make it as low as possible for the operators and for them from that initial investment. So so what I'd say is anybody who's interested in buying the system would be to contact us directly, and we can have a look at your requirements, and we can do a scope, and we can tell you a bespoke quote for yourselves.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Joel, honestly, it's been really great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Really informative. It sounds like a fantastic product. And thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much to you guys for asking all the questions. And if you want to find out more, you can book a meeting with a representative from the exhibitor booth. Otherwise, we'll be back at 12:45. Time to grab a snack, a cuppa, get a little bit of work done, and then come on back because we've got another product demo from Safe Time. Have a nice little break and we'll see you soon.